All righty. So there's a piece in the New York Times by Brooks. Albert Brooks, is that his name?
David Brooks, who I used to think was a black guy.
What?
Remember?
Why did you think that?
I've thought he was a black guy for like 15 years.
Why? Does he sound like a black guy?
No, I thought he looked like a black guy.
He doesn't look like a black guy.
I don't know why. I've always thought he was a black guy.
He's a white guy.
Apparently. I think he's a white Jewish guy.
Could be. I hope he had a most dignified Yom Kippur yesterday.
I know I did.
A lot of, fasting, atonement, and making personal vows for the year to come about the life you want to lead.
Excellent.
I think every person of every faith ought to do that. Maybe not the fasting. I get lightheaded when I'm hungry. Anyway, so David Brooks wrote this article in the New York Times, which is actually almost directly plagiarized from something we've been saying for quite some time.
Brother of?
Mel Brooks.
Oh, Garth Brooks.
Garth Brooks. Brother Garth Brooks, son of Mel Brooks.
Correct.
Right. Right, my mistake.
Oh, boy.
Garth. All right, so I'll just read you his lead because it's damn good. I always love it when the great respected thinkers of the world agree with me. And David Brooks of the New York Times, the lonely so-called conservative at the New York Times, wrote a column about economic morality. I thought his lead is excellent. Centuries ago, historians came up with a classic theory to explain the rise and decline of nations. The theory was that great nations start out tough-minded and energetic. Toughness and energy lead to wealth and power. Wealth and power lead to affluence and luxury. Affluence and luxury lead to decadence, corruption, and decline.
How many times have we said that? And it certainly happens for families.
Absolutely. John Adams wrote a letter to Thomas Jefferson many moons ago, and he said, quote, "Human nature, in no form of it, could ever bear prosperity," warning against the coming corruption of his country. Brooks makes an interesting point that despite its amazing wealth, the U.S. has generally remained immune to this cycle. We surpassed European living standards as early as 1740, but it really didn't lead to indulgence and decline. That's because despite the country's notorious materialism, there's always been a countervailing stream of sound economic values. The early settlers believed in Calvinist restraint. The pioneers volunteered for brutal hardship during their treks out west. Waves of immigrant parents worked hard and practiced self-denial so their children could succeed. Government was limited and did not protect people from consequences of their actions, thus enforcing discipline and restraint. Why do you act like a reasonable human being? Because you have to, economically. You know, that's really the answer to virtually every question of human behavior. Why do people act one way or another? Eventually, the answer is because they have to stay alive, or to not endure terrible pain or hardship. When economic values did erode, the ruling establishment tried to restore balance. They mentioned Teddy Roosevelt cracking down on financial self-indulgence and corporate greed. Protestant establishment had many failings, but it was not decadent. The old WASPs were notoriously cheap, sent their children to Spartan boarding schools, and insisted on financial sobriety.
That'd be like John D. Rockefeller.
Yeah.
I read Titan, his biography, and man, he was a cheap guy for being the richest man who ever lived.
Over the past few years, however, there's clearly been an erosion in the country's financial values. The erosion has happened at a time when the country's cultural monitors were busy with other things. They were busy fighting a culture war about prayer in schools, piss Christ, and the theory of evolution. That was that piece of, quote, art by Robert Mapplethorpe. That
right, that everybody gets up in arms and argues about like the nation's going to be destroyed by it.
Although, you can fight about that. I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. It's like saying, well, son, you can either play, baseball or football. You can play both of them.
Yeah, but the problem it tends to be is we do focus on that and not other stuff.
Well,
you could focus on both, but we don't.
And that's what Brooks is saying. They're arguing about sex and the separation of church and state, oblivious to the large erosion of economic values happening under their feet. And that's what we're always talking about, economic values. The idea of how you behave with your money being a moral question. And moral, not even like religious, spiritual moral, health moral. You know what I mean? There's an unhealthy way to handle money, and it's bad. It is bad for the organism. It's bad for the species. It's bad for the hive. if you want to get really biological. American society is a hive. And we can't have... We've got way too many drones who don't produce any honey and don't have sex with the queen. They're just nothing. And that is immoral. Anyway.
Who doesn't want to have sex with the queen?
Hello! Some of the signs are seemingly innocuous, he writes. States around the country began sponsoring lotteries. Government approved gambling that extract its largest toll from the poor. Executives and hedge fund managers began bragging about compensation packages that would have been considered shameful a few decades before. I know in my dad's day, and indeed in my childhood and teen years, you would never talk about how much money you made or how much money you spent on anything. Unless it was to say, boy, I got a good bargain over here. Maybe you want to check it out, my friend.